The suitcase shouldn't have been moving. Officer Tom Mitchell had seen thousands of bags pass through Phoenix's Greyhound station in 20 years, but none had ever made his German Shepherd freeze mid-step like that. Rex's ears shot forward, his entire body rigid as stone. "Come on, boy," Tom muttered, touching the resignation letter folded in his breast pocket. Last day. Just get through it. But Rex wasn't moving. The dog's nose worked frantically, pupils dilating as he tracked a nervous man clutching a vintage Samsonite. Something was wrong. Everything about the stranger screamed wrong, the sweat pouring down his face despite the air conditioning. The way his hands trembled on the handle, the lavender scent that didn't match his appearance. Then Tom heard it, a sound that turned his blood to ice. A child's muffled whimper coming from inside the suitcase. Rex lunged before Tom could breathe. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments, along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. Tom Mitchell had learned to recognize death long before it arrived. He'd seen it in his wife Margaret's eyes during those final hospital hours 3 years ago. Watched it creep closer while he sat in rush-hour traffic 20 miles away, responding to a domestic disturbance call he couldn't even remember now. By the time he'd burst through those sterile double doors, her hand was already cold. Emily had been there, though their daughter had held her mother's hand through those last breaths, had whispered the goodbyes Tom never got to say. She'd looked up at him with eyes that held something worse than grief. Disappointment so profound it had carved a canyon between them that still hadn't closed. "You chose the badge over Mom," she'd said, her voice flat and final. Those were the last words his daughter had spoken to him. 3 years of silence since then, 3 years of calls that went to voicemail, of birthday cards returned unopened. Now, Tom was 45 years old, 20 years on the Phoenix Police Department, and about to lose everything else he had left. The hospital bills from Margaret's cancer treatment had buried him $47,000 of debt that climbed higher, that every month with interest he couldn't touch. His credit cards were maxed at $8,300. The bank had sent the third foreclosure notice last week. The small 2-bedroom house in Maryvale, the one where Emily had grown up, where Margaret had planted roses every spring, would be gone within 60 days. And then there was Rex, the 5-year-old German Shepherd lying in the passenger seat of Tom's patrol car, had been rejected from the K-9 program 3 years ago for being too sensitive, too emotionally attached. Tom had taken him anyway, saw something of himself in those brown eyes that seemed to understand loss. They'd been partners ever since. Tom and the dog nobody else wanted. 2 weeks ago, Rex had stopped eating. The vet's diagnosis had been a gut-punch possible tumor. $3,500 for surgery Tom didn't have. He'd made the appointment for tomorrow morning, the one that would end with Rex going to sleep and never waking up. Tom had the euthanasia consent form folded in his wallet, right next to the photo of Margaret. He touched his wedding ring, a nervous habit he'd developed, 50 times a day, sometimes more. The silver band was wearing thin in spots from 3 years of anxious rotation. The coffee shop barista had handed back his credit card that morning with an apologetic smile. It was declined. "Officer." Tom had walked out without the coffee, his hands shaking. He couldn't even afford a $3 cup anymore. The Greyhound station on Van Buren Street was a monument to transient Libby's cracked tile floors, flickering fluorescent lights, and the particular smell of desperation mixed with diesel fumes. At 4:45 on a Tuesday afternoon in late May, with the temperature pushing 98 degrees outside, the air conditioning labored against 200 bodies packed into a space meant for half that number. Tom had been doing this final sweep more out of muscle memory than duty. His shift ended at 5. His career ended at 5. Everything ended at 5. The resignation letter sat in his breast pocket like a stone, already signed, dated for today. 20 years of service reduced to a single sheet of paper and a half-hearted handshake from a captain who'd already forgotten his name. Rex had other plans. The German Shepherd's transformation was instantaneous and absolute. One moment he'd been walking in a relaxed heel beside Tom, and the next, every muscle in his body had gone rigid. His ears shot forward so fast Tom heard the cartilage pop. The dog's nose lifted, nostrils flaring as he sorted through hundreds of competing scents with the precision of a sorting algorithm sweat. Perfume, fast food, exhaust, and something else. Something that made the hackles rise along his spine. Rex, heel, Tom said automatically. But his partner wasn't listening. The dog's focus had locked onto a man in the corner of the waiting area, near Gate 7, middle-aged, maybe early 50s, wearing clothes that looked like they'd been slept in. His hands clutched the handle of a large vintage Samsonite suitcase, the kind with brass corners and leather straps that Tom's grandfather might have carried. The man's face glistened with sweat despite the aggressive air conditioning, and his eyes kept darting toward the exit with the trapped desperation of a cornered animal. Tom's 20 years of instinct kicked in despite his exhaustion. Something was off. Everything about the stranger screamed wrong, the way his shoulders hunched protectively over the suitcase, the tremor in his hands, the fact that he was standing when everyone else was sitting, poised for flight. Rex took 3 steps forward before Tom could react, pulling against the leash with unprecedented force. In 3 years of partnership, the dog had never broken heel command, not once. Tom felt his pulse quicken. "Sir," Tom called out, his voice carrying the particular tone of authority that made people stop and listen. "Excuse me, sir, I need to speak with you." The man's head snapped up, his eyes going wide. For a fraction of a second, Tom saw something in that face, not guilt exactly, but something close to it. Fear, maybe, or resignation. "It's just a routine check," Tom continued, closing the distance between them. His hand moved instinctively to his belt, not to his weapon, but to his radio. "We're doing random security sweeps today. I'll need to see your ticket and ID." The man's throat worked as he swallowed. I have my rights. You can't just search people's belongings without probable cause." He wasn't wrong. Tom knew the law as well as anyone. But Rex was practically vibrating now, his whine climbing in pitch to something Tom had never heard before. The dog's training was impeccable. He'd been taught to alert silently to drugs, to sit calmly when he detected contraband. This wasn't training. This was something primal. "You're absolutely right, sir," Tom said, keeping his voice level and professional, even as adrenaline started dumping into his bloodstream. "I'm not asking to search anything. I'm just asking to verify your travel documents." A crowd was beginning to gather, that particular kind of audience that forms around potential conflict like iron filings around a magnet. Tom saw phones coming out, cameras being raised. Everything was documented now. Every interaction a potential viral video, every decision scrutinized by millions. The man glanced at his watch, then at the departure board. Gate 7, Tucson departing in 12 minutes. His jaw tightened with decision. "My bus is boarding," he said, and started to move. Rex made the choice for both of them. The German Shepherd lunged with explosive force. 75 pounds of muscle and determination hitting the end of the leash so hard that Tom stumbled forward. The dog's jaws didn't go for the man, they went for the suitcase, clamping onto one of the leather straps with crushing force. The man jerked backward, trying to maintain his grip. The suitcase swung between them like a pendulum. And then Tom heard it, a sound that stopped his heart mid-beat, a small, muffled whimper, high-pitched and terrified, unmistakably human, unmistakably a child coming from inside the suitcase. Time fractured into razor-sharp fragments. Tom's hand went to his radio before his conscious mind could process the command. "This is Unit 12 at the Greyhound station. Van Buren location. I need immediate backup and medical. Possible child endangerment situation. Suspect is a white male, early 50s, brown jacket, attempting to flee with a large suitcase. Move now." The man's face drained of all color. "No, no, you don't understand. Let go of the suitcase, sir, right now." Tom's voice had shifted into something harder, colder. The exhaustion that had weighed him down all day evaporated, replaced by a crystalline focus he hadn't felt in months. "Put it down and step back with your hands where I can see them." "I was trying to help her." The man's voice cracked, rising toward hysteria. "Nobody else would. Nobody else saw. Oh." "Hands now." At station security materialized from the crowd. Johnson and Peters, both former military, both competent. They flanked the man on either side while Tom dropped to his knees beside the suitcase. Rex released his grip on the strap, but his body remained coiled, ready, protective. The dog's eyes never left the case. Tom's hands shook as he reached for the latches. 20 years of training, 20 years of seeing humanity at its worst, and nothing had prepared him for this moment. The brass latches were old-fashioned, simple thumb releases. One popped open easily, the second was stuck, corroded with age. Another whimper from inside, louder this time, more desperate. "Break it," Tom said, his voice barely above a whisper. He pulled his baton from his belt and brought it down on the stubborn latch. Metal shrieked. The lock shattered. The crowd had grown to 50 people now, a ring of shocked faces and raised phones. Someone was crying. Tom heard the words, "Oh my God," repeated like a prayer. He lifted the lid. Inside, curled into an impossible space among blankets and clothes, was a little girl. 8 years old, maybe 9. She wore a pink dress with white flowers, now wrinkled and stained with sweat. Her dark hair was plastered to her forehead. In her arms, she clutched a teddy bear so worn that most of its fur had rubbed away to bare fabric. Her eyes were huge and frightened, blinking against the sudden light. But she was breathing. She was conscious. She was alive. "It's okay, sweetheart," Tom heard himself say, though his throat felt like it was closing. "You're safe now. I'm a police officer. Nobody's going to hurt you anymore." The girl didn't cry. That was the detail that would haunt Tom later. In the dark hours before dawn, She didn't scream or sob or fall apart. Instead, she looked directly at Rex, and her small hand reached out toward the dog's face. Rex responded with a gentleness Tom had never witnessed. The German shepherd lowered his head, allowing the girl's fingers to touch his muzzle, and then carefully, deliberately, licked her palm once, twice, a promise of protection written in a language older than words. "Thank you for finding me," the girl whispered, her voice raspy from dehydration. "I prayed someone would come. I prayed for this." Tom's vision blurred. He blinked hard, forcing the tears back. "Not now. Not in front of everyone. Can you tell me your name?" "Honey, Sarah Bennett." The name triggered something in Tom's memory, a bolo alert, a missing person report that had come across his desk yesterday or the day before. Tucson PD, 8-year-old girl disappeared from a bus station 36 hours ago. Amber alert issued. Parents frantic. Every cop in Arizona looking for her. And she'd been here, in this suitcase, the entire time. The EMTs arrived in a thunder of boots and equipment. Tom stepped back, letting the professionals take over, but Sarah's hand shot out and grabbed his sleeve with surprising strength. "Don't leave," she said. "Please don't leave me." "I won't," Tom promised. "I'm right here, and Rex is right here. We're not going anywhere." Officer Martinez appeared at Tom's shoulder, slightly out of breath. "Tom? Jesus Christ. Is she? She's alive. Alert Tucson PD. We found Sarah Bennett. Is behind them." Johnson and Peters had the man in handcuffs, reading him his rights in flat, professional voices. The man wasn't fighting. He wasn't trying to run. He just stood there, tears streaming down his face, muttering something Tom couldn't quite hear. "I called 3 times. The man was saying to no one in particular. "I called the police 3 times. Nobody listened. Nobody came. I had to do something. She needed help. She needed someone to see her." Tom's attention snapped back to the man. "What did you say?" But Martinez was already pulling Tom away, guiding him toward the ambulance where the EMTs were loading Sarah onto a gurney. Rex followed without being commanded. His body pressed against Tom's leg, solid and warm and real. "You did good, partner," Tom whispered to the dog. "You saved her. You knew." Rex's tail moved once, a slight wag. His eyes remained fixed on Sarah. As the ambulance doors closed, Tom looked down at his watch. 5:17. His shift had ended. His career should have ended. The resignation letter was still in his pocket, undelivered. He pulled it out, looked at it for a long moment, then slowly tore it in half. Phoenix Children's Hospital smelled like antiseptic and fear, a combination Tom knew too well. He'd walked these halls 3 years ago, following Margaret's gurney as cancer stole her away piece by piece. The memories pressed against him like physical weight as he rode in the ambulance with Sarah. Rex's solid presence beside him, the only thing keeping him grounded. Sarah hadn't let go of Rex's paw. Even as the EMTs checked her vitals, even as they inserted an IV line for fluids, her small fingers remained wrapped around the dog's leg. Rex sat perfectly still, a statue of patience, his brown eyes never leaving the girl's face. "Vitals are stable," the lead EMT reported, scribbling notes on her tablet. "Moderate dehydration, elevated heart rate, but no obvious signs of physical trauma. We'll need a full workup at the hospital." Detective Williams met them at the emergency entrance, his weathered face grim. He was old school, 25 years on the force, and he'd seen enough horror to last several lifetimes. but even he looked shaken as he watched Sarah being wheeled inside. "The parents are on their way from Tucson," William said, falling into step beside Tom. "ETA, about 2 hours. Dad's named Robert Bennett. Mom's Jennifer. Tech executives, both of them. Been going through a nasty divorce for the past 8 months. Tom filed away the information. His cop brain automatically cataloging details, even as his heart stayed focused on the small girl disappearing through the double doors. What about the suspect? Robert Hayes, 52, former elementary school teacher. Lost his teaching license 2 years ago after some kind of breakdown in the classroom. No priors. But Williams pulled out his phone, showed Tom a photograph. His daughter died 5 years ago. Car accident. She was 9 years old. Name was Lily. The pieces started falling into place, forming a picture Tom didn't want to see. Not a monster, a broken man who'd shattered so completely he couldn't tell Jew from destruction anymore. His wife committed suicide 2 years after the daughter died. Williams continued. Hayes has been in and out of psychiatric care ever since. Multiple medications for depression and PD. He was flagged by the Tucson PD 3 months ago for suspicious behavior near elementary schools, but nothing actionable. He said he called the police 3 times, Tom said quietly. About Sarah. Williams looked up sharply. What? Before he took her. He said he called 3 times, that nobody listened. I'll pull the recordings. Williams' jaw tightened. If that's true, we've got a different kind of problem on our hands. Inside the examination room, Dr. Chen was conducting a preliminary assessment. She was young, competent, with kind eyes that had somehow survived years of pediatric emergency medicine. Sarah sat on the examination table, still clutching her worn teddy bear, while Rex lay at her feet like a sentinel. Sarah, Dr. Chen said gently, I need to ask you some questions. Is that okay? The girl nodded, but her eyes kept darting to Tom, as if checking that he was still there. Can you tell me what happened? How did you end up in that suitcase? Sarah's voice was small but steady. I ran away. The words fell into the room like stones into still water, creating ripples Tom could almost see. You ran away from home, Dr. Chen clarified. From the bus station in Tucson. I was supposed to go home after school, but I heard them. Sarah's fingers tightened on the bear. My parents, they were fighting on the phone. My mom said... Her voice cracked. She said they should never have had a child, that I ruined everything, that she'd take the house if Dad took me. Tom felt something crack inside his chest. He thought of Emily, of all the times he'd chosen work over family, of all the moments he'd missed while telling himself he was being a good provider. Different circumstances, same fundamental failure. And then what happened? Sweetheart, Dr. Chen's voice remained steady, professional, but Tom saw her hand clench briefly into a fist. I packed my backpack and went to the bus station. I had $37 from my birthday. I was going to go to my grandma's house in California. Sarah paused. I didn't know she died. Nobody told me. How long were you at the station? A long time. Hours, maybe. I was crying because I didn't know what to do. And then Mr. Hayes came over. He asked if I was okay, if I needed help. Sarah looked up at Tom. "I told him my parents didn't want me, that nobody wanted me." The picture was becoming clearer and more terrible with each word. "Mr. Hayes said he would take care of me, that I wouldn't have to be alone anymore. He seemed nice, sad, but nice, like he understood." Sarah's voice dropped to a whisper. "He bought me dinner, let me sleep in a real bed at the motel. He never hurt me. He just kept calling me Lily and talking to someone who wasn't there." Dr. Chen glanced at Tom, a silent communication passing between them. This wasn't a predatory kidnapping. This was something far more complicated, far more tragic. "Why were you in the suitcase, Sarah?" "Mr. Hayes got scared when we got to Phoenix. He kept saying people were watching, that they'd take me away, that he had to keep me safe. He said if I got in the suitcase, just for a little while, we could get to Canada. He said in Canada we could be a real family." Sarah's composure finally cracked, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I was scared, but I was more scared of going home. So I got in the case. He put blankets in there and poked holes so I could breathe. He kept saying, 'It's okay, Lily. Daddy's got you.'" Rex stood up, placed his head on Sarah's lap. The girl buried her face in his fur, her small shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Tom stepped outside the examination room, his legs unsteady. He leaned against the wall, pressed the heels of his hands against his eyes. 20 years of police work, and he'd never encountered anything that hurt quite like this. A child so desperate for love, she'd climbed into a suitcase with a stranger. A man so destroyed by grief, he'd become the very danger he thought he was preventing. His phone buzzed. Unknown number from the Los Angeles area code. Tom ignored it, too raw to deal with anything else right now. Martinez appeared beside him holding 2 cups of terrible hospital coffee. "Thought you could use this?" "Thanks." Tom took the cup, let the heat burn his palms. Pain was grounding. "The media's already all over this," Martinez said. "News vans outside their helicopters, the whole circus. Captain wants you to give a statement. Tell the captain I'm staying with the girl until her parents arrive." "Tom, I don't think—" "I gave her my word. Martinez, I'm not leaving her." Tom's voice came out harder than he intended. "I've broken enough promises in my life." Martinez studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Okay, I'll handle the captain." Back in the examination room, Sarah had fallen asleep. Exhausted by trauma and relief, Rex hadn't moved from his position, head still resting on her lap. Dr. Chen was reviewing her notes, her expression troubled. "No signs of sexual abuse," she said quietly. "No physical trauma beyond the dehydration. If Hayes's goal was to harm her—" She trailed off, leaving the thought unfinished. "It wasn't," Tom said. "His goal was to save her from parents who made her feel worthless. That doesn't excuse kidnapping. No, but it explains it." Tom looked through the window at Sarah's sleeping form, and it raises questions about where the real crime started. Dr. Chen followed his gaze. "CPS will need to investigate the home situation before she's released. Standard protocol." Tom nodded. He thought about the resignation letter, torn in half and stuffed in his pocket. Thought about Rex, who was supposed to die tomorrow morning. Thought about Emily, who'd called from Los Angeles while he was too busy saving someone else's daughter to answer his own. Some days you're the dog. Some days you're the hydrant. Today, they'd all been something else. Today, they'd been found. The Bennett parents arrived separately, which told Tom everything he needed to know before they even opened their mouths. Robert Bennett came first, pulling up in a silver Tesla, still wearing his suit from whatever boardroom he'd abandoned mid-meeting. He was tall, fit, the kind of man who probably had a Peloton in his home office and took calls during workout. His face was professionally concerned, the expression of someone who'd practiced empathy in a mirror, but never quite mastered it. Jennifer Bennett arrived 20 minutes later in a black BM, also suited, also performing the role of worried parent, with the slightly forced quality of someone reading lines they didn't quite believe. She was beautiful in that carefully maintained way that required significant investment highlighting. Botox, designer clothes that probably cost more than Tom's monthly mortgage payment. They met in the hospital parking lot, and Tom watched through the window as they immediately began arguing. He couldn't hear the words, but the body language was clear. Pointing fingers, defensive postures, a marriage that had died long before the lawyers got involved. Detective Williams intercepted them before they could reach the entrance, performing the necessary preliminaries. Tom stayed with Tia, who'd woken up and was now sitting in bed, picking at a tray of bland hospital food she wasn't eating. Rex remained on the floor beside her, a constant presence. "Are they here?" Sarah asked, her voice small. "My parents—" "They are. They've been very worried about you." Sarah's expression suggested she didn't quite believe that, and Tom's heart broke a little more. 8 years old, and already she'd learned to recognize performative love from the real thing. "Do I have to go with them?" Tom knelt beside the bed, bringing himself to eye level. "A social worker is going to talk to everyone first. Nobody's going to make you do anything that isn't safe, okay? But what if they make me go back?" Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "I don't want to go back to that house. It's not a home. It's just a place where I sleep and nobody notices me." Before Tom could respond, the door opened. Robert and Jennifer Bennett entered, flanked by Detective Williams and a hospital social worker named Margaret Rodriguez. The parents' expressions were complex mixtures of relief, anger, and something that might have been guilt if it had been allowed to fully form. "Sarah?" Jennifer moved forward, arms outstretched, but stopped when Sarah shrank back against the pillows, her hand finding Rex's fur. "Baby, we've been so worried," Robert said, his voice cracking with what sounded like genuine emotion. "Thank God you're safe." "Are we sure she's safe?" Jennifer's voice had an edge that made Tom's jaw tighten. "She was kidnapped, traumatized. We need to discuss pressing charges, getting her the best psychiatric care." "Mrs. Bennett," Rodriguez interjected smoothly, "perhaps we could discuss this outside the patient's room." "I want to see my daughter. We have a right to see our daughter. And you are seeing her," Rodriguez said, her voice professional steel wrapped in velvet. "However, given the circumstances, Child Protective Services will need to conduct a full investigation before Sarah is released to anyone's custody." Robert's face flushed. "Investigation? We're the victims here. Our daughter was taken from us by some lunatic." "I wasn't taken," and Sarah's voice cut through the room like a knife. "I ran away because you said you didn't want me." The silence that followed was absolute. Jennifer's face went pale. "Sarah, honey, you misunderstood. We were just stressed. We didn't mean—" "You said I ruined everything." Sarah's voice was steady now, fueled by something that looked like anger, but sounded like grief. "You said Mom would take the house and Dad would take me. Like I was furniture you were dividing up. Like I was a thing nobody wanted." "We were angry at each other, not at you," Robert said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Adults say things they don't mean when they're fighting." "You mean them." Sarah looked at her parents with devastating clarity. "You just don't want to admit it." As Tom watched Jennifer Bennett's face cycle through emotions like shuffling card shock, defensiveness, anger, and finally something that might have been recognition. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Jennifer started, then stopped. Her hands twisted together, an unconscious gesture that made her look suddenly human, suddenly vulnerable. "I don't know what to say." "How about the truth?" Tom heard himself say, immediately regretting the intrusion, but unable to stop. "How about whether you actually want your daughter, or whether you just want to avoid the scandal of not wanting her?" "Officer Mitchell," William said, a warning in his voice. But Jennifer wasn't looking at Williams. She was looking at Tom with something like gratitude, as if he'd finally given her permission to be honest. "I don't know if I'm a good mother," she said quietly. "I don't know if I ever was. My parents weren't warm people. They provided everything materially, but emotionally—" She trailed off, looking at Sarah. "I thought if I gave you everything they gave me, the best schools, the best clothes, the best opportunities, that would be enough. I didn't realize I was repeating their mistakes." Robert had made a sound that might have been agreement or distress. "I work 80 hours a week. I tell myself it's for Sarah, to give her a good life. But—" he ran a hand through his hair. "The truth is, I don't know how to be a father. I never learned. And rather than admit that, I just worked more." Sarah was crying now, quiet tears that tracked down her cheeks. "I just wanted you to see me, and to really see me, not just remember I exist when you're fighting about who has to keep me." The rawness of it, the absolute emotional honesty seemed to crack something in the room. Jennifer sank into a chair, her professional composure finally shattering. Robert stood frozen, his hands clenched at his sides. "Mr. and Mrs. Bennett," Rodriguez said gently, "I think what your daughter needs right now is time and space. And I think what you both need is to honestly examine whether you're ready to be the parents she deserves, not the parents you think you should be, the ones she actually needs." Tom's phone buzzed again, the Los Angeles number. For the third time, he ignored it. Rex stood up, shook himself, and walked over to Sarah. He laid his head in her lap, and she buried her fingers in his fur like it was the only solid thing in a world that wouldn't stop spinning. "Can I stay with Officer Mitchell?" Sarah asked, her voice muffled. "And Rex just for tonight." Tom's throat tightened. He thought of Emily, of all the nights she'd needed him, and he hadn't been there, of all the times he'd chosen duty over family, believing it was the same thing when it absolutely wasn't. That's not really how it works. "Sweetheart," Rodriguez said kindly, but Tom found himself saying, "I'll stay here at the hospital as long as she needs me to." Williams looked at him sharply. The Bennetts looked stunned, and Sarah, for the first time since they'd found her, smiled. God. The call came at 2:30 in the morning, while Tom dozed fitfully in the hospital chair, his hand resting on Rex's head. Sarah had finally fallen into an exhausted sleep after hours of questioning, evaluation, and the careful dance of adults trying to fix something they'd spent years breaking. Dr. Elizabeth Morrison's voice was gentle but urgent. "Officer Mitchell, this is the emergency veterinary clinic. You have Rex registered as your dog." Tom's blood turned to ice. "Yes. Why, what's happened?" "I'm calling about his appointment tomorrow today. Actually, at 10 a.m. The euthanasia appointment. In all the chaos, Tom had completely forgotten. His stomach dropped through the floor. "We ran some additional tests based on the blood work from last week." Dr. Morrison continued. "Officer Mitchell, I need to see Rex immediately." "Can you bring him in now?" "It's the middle of the night." "I know. Please, it's urgent." Tom looked at Sarah, sleeping peacefully for the first time in days, one hand still tangled in Rex's fur. Even in sleep, the dog had barely moved in 8 hours. Maintaining his vigil with the dedication that had made him a police dog, despite everyone saying he was too sensitive, too attached, too much. "I can't leave the girl," Tom said. "She's—" "Tom." Martinez appeared in the doorway, looking exhausted. "I got your back. Take care of your partner." The drive to the emergency vet clinic was a blur of streetlights and dread. Rex sat in the passenger seat, alert now, sensing Tom's anxiety the way he always did. The dog's brown eyes held something that looked uncomfortably like understanding, like acceptance. "You're not dying on me," Tom said, his voice rough. "You hear me. You just saved that little girl's life. You don't get to leave now." Rex's tail thumped once against the seat. Durr. Morrison met them at the entrance, her face illuminated by the harsh fluorescent lights. She was younger than Tom expected, maybe mid-30s, with kind eyes that had probably seen too much death already. "Bring him back," she said without preamble. In the examination room, she pulled up images on a computer screen, scans, blood work, charts that meant nothing to Tom's exhausted brain. "The tumor we identified last week," Morrison said. "It's growing faster than we anticipated, much faster. Based on these new scans, Rex has maybe 72 hours before it impacts vital organs. After that—" She trailed off, the ending obvious. Tom felt the room tilt. "The surgery! You said it would cost $3,500. "The surgery would have bought him time last week. Now," Dr. Morrison's expression was grave. "Now we're looking at emergency intervention. The tumor's attached to major blood vessels. The risk of complications is significant. Blood loss, stroke, cardiac arrest, and the cost." She hesitated. "With the emergency nature and the complexity, we're looking at close to $6,000. That's with no guarantee of success. His survival rate is maybe 50-50. $6,000. Tom had $247 in his checking account. His credit cards were maxed. The house was in foreclosure. He couldn't even afford a $3 cup of coffee. "If I don't do the surgery, then we keep him comfortable for the next day or two, and when the pain becomes too much, we let him go peacefully. It's a valid choice. Officer Mitchell, Sometimes the kindest thing we can do is spare them the suffering." Tom looked down at Rex, who sat patiently, watching him with those impossibly understanding eyes. The dog who'd been rejected from the canine program for being too emotionally attached. The dog who'd saved Sarah Bennett's life just by refusing to give up. The dog who'd licked Tom's tears every night for 3 years when grief threatened to swallow him whole. "Do the surgery," Tom heard himself say. "I don't care about the cost. Do whatever it takes. Mr. Mitchell, I need to be clear about the financial. I'll sell the house. I'll sell everything. Just save him." Dr. Morrison studied him for a long moment. "The surgery needs to happen in the next 2 to 3 hours. I'll need at least $2,000 down before we can proceed." $2,000 he didn't have. $2,000 he couldn't borrow. $2,000 that might as well have been $2,000,000. Tom reached for his wedding ring, the silver band he'd worn for 15 years, that he'd twisted anxiously 50 times a day for the past 3 years. The inscription inside read, "To the best father, love, M&E. Father's Day, 2010. Margaret and Emily had given it to him when Emily was 10 years old, when he'd still been the kind of father who showed up. "How much can I get for this?" he asked, his voice breaking. Dr. Morrison's expression shifted to something like pity. "Officer Mitchell, how much?" She looked at the ring, then at his face, then at Rex, who'd moved to press against Tom's leg. "Let me make some calls," she said quietly. "Give me 10 minutes." Tom sat on the cold floor, Rex's head in his lap, and finally let himself cry. Tom was still on the floor with Rex when the clinic door burst open. He looked up, expecting Dr. Morrison, and instead saw a young woman silhouetted against the early morning darkness beyond. For a moment, his exhausted brain couldn't process what he was seeing. Then she stepped into the light, and Tom's world stopped spinning. Emily, his daughter, stood in the doorway. 23 years old and visibly pregnant 4 months at least, maybe 5, wearing yoga pants and an oversized sweatshirt, her dark hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She had Margaret's eyes, the same gray-blue that could look like storm clouds or clear skies depending on the light. Right now, they were red-rimmed and spilling over with the tears. "Dad," she said, her voice cracking on the single syllable. Tom tried to stand, his legs unsteady. Rex remained pressed against him, sensing the emotional earthquake about to hit. "What are you doing here? How did you I've been calling you for hours. I saw the news. You and Rex saving that little girl." Emily took a shaky breath. "I drove from L.A. 6 hours straight. I kept calling and you wouldn't answer, and I thought maybe you didn't want to talk to me, that I'd waited too long and you'd given up on me the way I gave up on you." The words hit Tom like physical blows. 3 years of silence, 3 years of unanswered calls and returned birthday cards, 3 years of grief compounding on grief until he'd stopped trying because trying hurt worse than accepting defeat. "I could never give up on you," Tom said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You're my daughter. You're all I have left of her. I'm pregnant." And Emily's hands moved to her stomach, a protective gesture. 4 months, the father. He left when he found out, said he wasn't ready to be a dad. that he had his whole life ahead of him, all the usual bullshit. She laughed, but it came out broken, and all I could think was that I'm terrified and I'm going to be a terrible mother, that I don't know how to do this, that I barely remember what a good parent looks like because I wasn't one. Tom finished the sentence for her. Because when your mom was dying, I was at work, because I missed her last hours, because I chose duty over family and told myself it was the same thing. Emily's face crumpled. I was so angry at you. For so long, I blamed you for not being there. But then I saw you on the news tonight, saw you with that little girl, saw the way you looked at her, and I remembered. She pressed her hands to her eyes. I remembered when you used to look at me like that. Before everything fell apart, before Mom got sick, and I realized I've been punishing you for 3 years for something you've been punishing yourself for longer. Tom closed the distance between them in 3 strides and pulled his daughter into his arms. She came without resistance, and for the first time in 3 years, Tom held his child while she cried. She felt different, older, pregnant, carrying her own weight of loss and fear, but she still fit against him the way she had when she was small, and the world was simpler, and he'd still believed he could protect her from everything. I'm so sorry, Tom said into her hair. I'm sorry I wasn't there. I'm sorry I failed you. I'm sorry I made you feel like you weren't the most important thing in my world. Because you were, you are, you always have been. I'm scared, Dad. Emily's voice was muffled against his shoulder. I'm going to have a baby, and I don't know how to do this. I don't have a partner. I barely have a job. And I'm terrified I'm going to mess up the way our family messed up. You won't, Tom said with absolute certainty. You won't, because you're already asking the questions, already worried about doing it right. That's more than most parents ever do. They stood like that for a long moment, father and daughter, 3 years of silence finally breaking. Rex watched from his position on the floor, tail wagging slowly, somehow understanding that his pack was reforming, that broken things were being carefully pieced back together. Dart Morrison cleared her throat from the doorway. I'm sorry to interrupt, but we need to make a decision about Rex soon. Emily pulled back, wiping her eyes. What's wrong with Rex? Tom explained quickly. The tumor, the surgery, the impossible cost. With each sentence, Emily's expression grew more stricken. How much do you need? She asked. Emily, no, you're pregnant. You need your savings. How much? 2,000 down. But I can't take your money. You need it for the baby. Emily pulled out her phone, opened her banking app. I have $2,300. It was supposed to be for baby stuff. But she looked down at Rex, then back at Tom. Rex is family, and maybe this baby needs to learn that family means showing up, that family means sacrifice, that sometimes love costs everything and you pay it anyway because that's what love is. Tom's throat closed completely. He couldn't speak, could only shake his head. Let me do this, Dad, Emily said softly. Let me be part of fixing something instead of breaking it, please? Before Tom could respond, another voice cut through the moment. How much is needed for the total surgery? Robert Bennett stood in the doorway, still wearing his suit from earlier, looking like he hadn't slept. Jennifer was behind him, her perfect makeup smudged with exhaustion and tears. "Mr. Bennett," Tom started. "You don't need to—" "How much?" Robert's voice was firm. Dr. Morrison glanced between them, clearly uncomfortable with the sudden crowd in her clinic. The full surgery, with post-operative care and medications, would run approximately $7,000. Robert pulled out his checkbook without hesitation. "I'll cover it, all of it." "Robert, what are you doing?" Jennifer asked. But her tone wasn't angry. It was curious, maybe even hopeful. "Something I should have done years ago," Robert had said. Signing the check with quick, decisive strokes, putting someone else's needs first, understanding what loyalty actually looks like. He handed the check to Dr. Morrison, then turned to Tom. "Your dog saved our daughter's life. More than that, you showed us what it means to actually show up, to be present, to care about someone more than yourself." He paused, his professional composure cracking to reveal something raw underneath. "I've spent the last 3 hours sitting in that hospital room with Sarah while she slept, really looking at her. And I realized I couldn't tell you what her favorite color is, what she likes to read, what makes her laugh. I'm her father, and I don't know my own daughter." Jennifer spoke up, her voice thick with emotion. "We don't deserve her. Maybe we never did. But we're going to try to become the parent she deserves, starting with learning what it means to care about something more than our careers, our divorce, our own egos." She looked at Rex, then at Emily's pregnant belly, then at Tom. "You're all strangers to us, but you've shown more love to our daughter in 12 hours than we've shown her in 8 years. That's shameful, and it needs to change." "Dirt." Morrison held up the check. "This is enough for everything. Rex goes into surgery in 30 minutes. You should all go back to the hospital, get some rest. I'll call when he's out." Tom looked at his daughter, at the Bennetts, at Rex lying patiently on the floor, at this strange, broken collection of people who'd been thrown together by tragedy and were somehow, impossibly, becoming something like family. "We'll wait," Tom said. "All of us. Together." The surgery took 4 hours. 4 hours of bad coffee and uncomfortable plastic chairs, and the particular silence that exists when strangers are forced to wait together for news that might break their hearts. Tom sat with Emily on one side, her head eventually resting on his shoulder as exhaustion claimed her. The Bennetts sat across from them, Robert holding Jennifer's hand in a way that looked both familiar and foreign, like they were remembering how, when Dr. de Morrison finally emerged at 7:15 in the morning, her scrub spotted with blood, they all stood at once. "He made it through," she said, and Tom felt his knees go weak. Emily caught his arm, steadying him. "It was close. Oh, we lost him twice on the table. His heart stopped both times, but we got him back. The tumor is out. He's in recovery now." "Can I see him?" Tom asked. "He's still unconscious. It'll be several hours before he wakes up, and when he does—" Dr. Morrison hesitated. "There's always a risk with this kind of surgery. Brain damage from oxygen deprivation, personality changes, loss of training. We won't know until he wakes up what we're dealing with." He nodded, understanding the unspoken message. Rex might survive, but not be Rex anymore. The dog who understood human emotion better than most humans, who'd sensed Sarah in that suitcase when everyone else saw only luggage. That dog might be gone, I need to see him anyway, Tom said. Dara Morrison led him back alone. Rex lay on a steel table, tubes running from his legs, a cone around his neck, his chest rising and falling with mechanical precision. He looked small somehow, vulnerable in a way Tom had never seen him. The mighty police dog reduced to fragile flesh and blood and hope. Tom placed his hand on Rex's head, careful to avoid the IV lines. You fought for Sarah. You fought for me. Now I'm going to fight for you. You're not alone in this, partner. I'm right here. Rex's ear twitched, a tiny movement that might have been recognition or might have been nothing at all. The week that followed was a blur of hospital visits, police statements, and the slow, painful process of untangling a tragedy that had no clear villains, just broken people making terrible choices, born from unbearable pain. Bob Hayes' case became a media firestorm. The dispatcher recordings were released, all 3 calls where he'd tried to report Sarah's situation, tried to turn himself in, tried to do the right thing, even as his fractured mind couldn't distinguish between helping and harming. The system had failed him. The system had failed Sarah. The system had failed everyone, and the public wanted someone to blame. Tom found himself at the center of it, the cop who'd saved the girl with the help of a heroic dog. News vans camped outside his house. Reporters wanted interviews. Someone started a GoFundMe for Rex's medical expenses. And then, when they learned about Tom's debt, for him too, the money poured in $50,000, $75,000, climbing past 6 figures. Strangers from across the country sending $10, $20, sometimes hundreds, all of them moved by a story about loyalty and second chances. Tom tried to refuse it at first. Pride, maybe, or shame that his financial failures had become public spectacle. But Emily convinced him otherwise. Let people help, Dad, she said, her hand on her growing belly. Let them be part of something good. God knows there's enough darkness in the world. If this story makes them believe in goodness again, let them have that. The foreclosure notice was paid off. The hospital debt cleared. Margaret's medical bills finally settled. Tom found himself with money left over, more than he'd ever had in his savings account, enough to breathe for the first time in 3 years. Sarah's situation was more complicated. CPS investigated the Bennett household thoroughly, interviewing teachers, neighbors, the housekeeper who'd seen too much and said too little. The picture that emerged was of a child raised in material luxury but emotional poverty. No physical abuse, no neglect in the traditional sense, but something equally damaging, the slow starvation of a soul that needed love and received only provision. The court mandated family therapy 3 times a week. Robert and Jennifer were required to reduce their work hours, to attend parenting classes, to prove they could be more than occasional visitors in their daughter's life. Sarah remained in temporary foster care during this period, staying with a kind woman named Patricia who had 3 other foster children and a golden retriever named Sunshine. Tom visited Sarah twice a week, bringing updates on Rex's recovery. The dog was healing slowly, still weak, but undeniably himself. His personality remained intact, his training unaffected, his gentle sensitivity not only preserved but somehow deepened by his brush with death. On their 3rd visit, Sarah showed Tom a drawing she'd made a police officer, a dog, a little girl, and now added in crayon. A pregnant woman? That's my family? Sarah said simply. The one that found me. Tom's throat tightened. He thought about family, about blood and choice, about the people you're born to and the people who choose to stay, about Emily, who'd driven 6 hours in the middle of the night because she'd finally remembered that love means showing up, about Rex, who'd refused to give up on a little girl everyone else had walked past, about the Bennetts, who were learning slowly and painfully what it meant to be parents instead of providers. You know your mom and dad are trying really hard, Tom said gently. They're in therapy. They're learning. I know. Sarah colored carefully inside the lines of her drawing. Ms. Rodriguez says maybe in a few months I can try going home again. If they keep trying, how do you feel about that? Sarah was quiet for a long moment, scared, but also maybe a little hopeful. They came to visit yesterday. We played a board game together. Dad put his phone away the whole time. Mom asked me about my favorite book and then actually listened when I told her. She looked up at Tom with those old soul eyes. It's not fixed, but maybe it's not completely broken anymore either. 3 months after the suitcase incident, Rex was cleared to return to light duty. Tom, however, had made a different decision. He transferred to a new position, K-9 training coordinator, desk job mostly, regular hours, weekends off. For the first time in 20 years, Rex would become a certified therapy dog, working with traumatized children at the crisis center. Emily had moved into Tom's spare bedroom, her pregnancy now 7 months along. They were converting the third bedroom, once full of boxes and forgotten things, into a nursery. Tom found himself building a crib, painting walls a soft yellow, doing all the things he'd been too busy to do when Emily was born. Mom would love this, Emily said one evening, watching Tom struggle with crib instructions. You being a grandpa, getting a second chance. Your mom was always better at forgiveness than I was, Tom said, finally getting a piece to click into place. She would have fixed things with you years ago. Maybe, but she's not here. You are. That's what matters. The baby's name was chosen Margaret Rose Mitchell, Maggie for short, a name that honored the past while reaching toward the future. The Bennett's progress was slower, but real. Robert had stepped down from his CEO position, taking a consulting role that paid half as much but required 70% less time. Jennifer had started a nonprofit for working mothers struggling with postpartum depression and attachment issues, channeling her own failures into helping others avoid the same mistakes. They had family dinners now, awkward at first, full of long silences and tentative conversations, but getting easier. Sarah was learning to trust again. Her parents were learning to be worthy of that trust 6 months after that terrible, transformative day at the Greyhound station. They all gathered at Tom's house for a celebration. Emily was 9 months pregnant, due any day. Sarah was living back with her parents on a trial basis, with CPS monitoring but hopeful. Rex was officially certified as a therapy dog, his gentle wisdom now shared with dozens of traumatized children. And Bob Hayes, after completing his psychiatric treatment, had been approved for supervised community reintegration. He would never be alone with children again, would never be fully free of monitoring. But he was teaching art therapy to other patients in the mental health facility, helping people navigate the grief that had once destroyed him. Sarah had asked if she could write to him. Tom and the Bennetts had discussed it at length with Dr. Rodriguez, finally agreeing to supervise correspondence. Sarah's first letter was simple. "Thank you for seeing me when no one else did. I forgive you. I hope you can forgive yourself." Bob's response, read aloud by the therapist supervising their exchange, had reduced everyone to tears. "You gave me a reason to get better, to honor Lily properly, to understand that loving someone means wanting what's best for them, not what makes your pain hurt less. I'm sorry I confused the two. I'm grateful you're safe. I'm grateful you found the family you deserved." And now, in Tom's small backyard, an unlikely family gathered, Tom at the grill, his first time hosting a real family event in years, Emily in a lawn chair, her belly enormous, one hand pressed to where Maggie kicked, Sarah teaching Rex to play gentle with a tennis ball, the dog patient and careful with the girl who'd given him new purpose, Robert and Jennifer sitting together, not fighting, actually talking about something other than logistics and division of assets. "Dad," Emily called out, "you look happy." Tom paused, spatula in hand, and realized that she was right. For the first time in 3 years, maybe longer, he felt something approaching peace. The grief was still there. Margaret's absence was still a wound that would never fully heal. But around that wound, new tissue had grown, new connections, new possibilities. "I am happy," he said, surprised by the truth of it. Sarah brought over her ever-present sketchbook, now filled with months of drawings chronicling their strange journey. She'd added a new page, all of them together, adults and child and dog and unborn baby, gathered around a table that looked like Tom's picnic table. The title, written in Sarah's careful handwriting, "The Day Everyone Was Found." Tom's phone buzzed to Bart Morrison with the Rex 6-month checkup results. Clean scans, no sign of cancer recurrence, full health clearance. Tom showed the message to Emily, who cried, then to the Bennetts, who smiled with genuine joy, then to Sarah, who threw her arms around Rex and whispered, "You're going to be okay. We're all going to be okay." That evening, as the sun set over Phoenix and the temperature finally dropped below 90, they sat around Tom's picnic table eating slightly burnt hamburgers and potato salad from the grocery store. It wasn't fancy, it wasn't perfect, but it was real. Jennifer raised her glass of lemonade. "I want to propose a toast," she said, her voice uncertain but sincere. "To second chances, to the people who don't give up on us even when we've given up on ourselves, to families that don't look like we expected but somehow are exactly what we needed," Robert added, "to a little girl who taught adults how to love." Emily, "To four-legged angels who save us in ways we don't even understand." Sarah, her small voice clear and strong, "To Officer Tom and Rex, who found me when I was lost." Tom looked around the table at these people, his daughter, pregnant and brave and learning to forgive, the Bennetts, broken but healing, failing better each day. Sarah, once invisible, now seen and valued and safe. Rex, lying under the table, gentle guardian of them all. "To showing up," Tom said, finally, "to being present, to the hardest, most important work we'll ever do, learning to love imperfectly but completely." They clinked glasses, lemonade and iced tea and water, and in that moment Tom understood what Margaret had tried to tell him in those final hospital hours he'd missed. Family wasn't about being perfect. It was about being there. It was about trying, failing, and trying again. It was about second chances. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, third ones too. 3 days later, at 2 in the morning, Emily went into labor. And Tom drove her to the hospital, Rex in the back seat like always. And when Maggie finally arrived, 7 pounds, 3 ounces of squalling, perfect humanity, Tom held his granddaughter and cried tears he didn't know he still had in him. Sarah visited the next day with the Bennetts, bringing a hand-knitted baby blanket she'd made in her art therapy sessions. Rex was allowed a brief visit, and Tom watched as the dog who'd saved Sarah gently sniffed the newest member of their strange patchwork family, then settled beside Emily's hospital bed like a sentinel. "She's beautiful," Sarah whispered, looking at Maggie with wonder. "She's so lucky. She's going to have the best grandpa." Tom looked at his daughter, at his granddaughter, at Sarah and Rex, and even the Bennetts, standing awkwardly in the corner, at this family that had formed from tragedy and trauma and the simple, radical act of showing up. "I'm the lucky one," Tom said, and meant it with every fiber of his being. Outside the hospital window, the Phoenix sun rose on a new day, golden and warm and full of impossible, improbable hope. The end? Sometimes we think we've run out of second chances. We carry our regrets like stones in our pockets, weighing us down with every step. We look at the years behind us and see all the moments we missed, all the people we let down, all the choices we can't undo. We tell ourselves it's too late to heal what's been broken, too late to rebuild what we've lost. But here's the truth that Tom and Emily and even the Bennetts learned in the hardest way possible. It's never too late to show up. It's never too late to say the things that need saying, to bridge the gaps we've let grow too wide, to choose connection over pride. Family isn't always the people we're born to. Sometimes it's the ones who find us when we're lost, who stay when staying is hard, who forgive us when we finally find the courage to try again. The question isn't whether we deserve another chance. The question is whether we're brave enough to take it. So here's what I want to know. What relationship in your life deserves a second chance? What conversation have you been putting off that needs to happen? Share your story in the comments below. Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today.